Thumbs up. All right, welcome. Before I get into our service, I wanted to talk for a moment about an announcement that we got yesterday. One of our former members, who was also one of our board presidents, and she works now at Elliott Chapel. Her husband died yesterday in a horrible bicycling accident, and unfortunately did not survive. Many people know Debbie Lovell. And if you do, obviously, know that we're all in a lot of pain and sadness about this. For those that do know Debbie, she's asked no phone calls, please. She just is not in a headspace to take a call or feel inundated with that. I'm in communication with, obviously, with Claudia and Krista, and Dee also is aware. I think you said Dee is also aware, and Juliet and Kelly Crone Willis. They've known Jeff and Debbie for 40 years. They've been friends. And Juliet and Kelly, they've been here to a few services. They're members and have been longtime members as well. So I'm in talk with them. And as we know of ways to support them, whether it's I don't think a GoFundMe, but I don't know what will be needed. Food, who the heck knows? A memorial, I don't know either. But I will keep you all posted as we need. But respect her privacy for now, and all we could do is send out good vibes to support them. So anyway, that will be it. I don't think there was anything else. All right, we'll get started with our service then. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Metro East Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and greetings to all of you that are serving remotely, you're listening to the service remotely. Everybody say hello. Hi. All right, we want to make sure everybody hears that you are a part of this, even though you may not be here in this space. We are a welcoming religious community, and we are very glad that you are here. My name is Robin Berkeley. My pronouns are she, her. I had been a member of this congregation, I realized, since 2010. That's like 14 years. It feels like forever, right? I'm the past president of the congregation, and I also serve as a worship associate. I coordinate all of the worship stuff here. The MEUUC is located in Glen Carbon, Illinois, spiritually led by the Reverend Dr. Claudia Hall, and we gratefully share sacred space with the Edwards Hall Masonic Lodge. Our mission drives us to live our values. We are outward reaching, inward seeking. We are creating and nurturing an intentional community that values acceptance, social justice, and the embodiment of UU principles. So come, let us question together. I'm so glad that you're here, whether you're in the sanctuary or online. And we hope we welcome everyone in this home of comfort, spirit, justice, and hope. We are Unitarian Universalists. And we'll open our service with a prelude by Joy. That was fun. Thank you. Okay. An important ritual in the Unitarian Universalist faith is the lighting of our chalice. Unitarian Universalists have many different interpretations of the flaming chalice, including the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope. Today I'm going to be lighting it because I forgot to recruit somebody in advance. Unless anybody wants to stand up and volunteer now. You want to come do it? Okay, come on up. You're welcome, sweetheart. Thank you. So if you're watching elsewhere and have a chalice or candle, please light it now, and we all join in our unison words projected on the screen. We gather this hour, both of faith, grace, we got this. Maybe we don't. There you go. Yay! Be careful of your fingers. There you go. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yay! This has got a little melty, so maybe we need to replace our. Oh, there it is. Just took a few extra pushes to get it through. All right. Thank you very much. So our opening prayer today is in the Gray Hymnal number 420 by Annie Dillard. We are here to abet creation and to witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. Please stand and body your spirit to sing our opening hymn, number 298 in the Gray Hymnal, Wake Now My Senses. Thank you. You can be seated. I forgot there were 5 verses. So today's sermon is going to be a little bit about a couple of different things, and primarily about unconscious bias, and then linking in some information about Maya Angelou, who I adore. And I utilize, when I do a lot of my training in the business field with unconscious bias and stuff like that, I often talk about, when you know better, you do better, and that's a quote that's attributed to Maya Angelou. So we'll talk a little bit of time. Our children's story will be about her, and then I'll kind of link it all together in the end. But there's three basic principles that I think this will align with. Number one is the interdependence. And basically, we're working to repair harm when we understand our part in the great web of life. And with unconscious bias, that's our goal, right? It's like recognizing when we have an unconscious bias and then moving forward to make amends, to fix the problem. So we have to recognize that repairing harm is so important. And we have pluralism, where we celebrate our diversity and embrace differences. And again, that's foundationally what unconscious bias is about, how important it is for us to embrace the differences, the different gifts that we all bring to the table, but also recognizing that there are unconscious biases underneath the way that we see and interpret the world. And I'll talk in more detail about that specifically as we get into the sermon. And then lastly, justice, which is about dismantling racism and all forms of oppression. And that's really what we need to do when we're acknowledging our unconscious biases, is working to dismantle piece by piece, inch by inch, the unconscious bias and the oppression that exists in this world. So keep that in mind as we go through the stuff today. As part of our weekly worship service, we take time for the expression of joys, concerns, or sorrows. Here we can each share the things that weigh down our souls or that fill us up with joy, and where those we love surround us in good times and in turmoil. If you would like to recognize a joy, a sorrow, a milestone, you can come forward and place a stone or several stones in the water to represent your joys and sorrows. There are stones in front. I invite you to come forward now. Choose a stone or stones and place it in there as a symbol of what is weighing, what you carry in your heart, and how we can support you in any way possible. So let us be in a spirit of prayer and meditation as we move forward. If anybody needs mobility help with respect to the stones, let me know as well. This one's for the world today. This one's for me, but it's been a really, really rough couple of weeks. Okay, so our story for all ages today is called The History of Maya Angelou for kids. So it just gives us a little bit of background about her. Honestly, I didn't know anything about her until Bill Clinton became inaugurated as president, and I heard her words and her beautiful poetry and stories, and I found her to be just a phenomenal beacon of hope, if you will. And then I learned more about her, and particularly that quote: "When you do the best you can till you know better. When you know better, you do better." And that's obviously the goal of the sermon today, but also something I try to live by. So I will let that roll.
Maya Angelou was born on April 4th, 1928, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her full name was Marguerite, but her older brother had trouble saying her name, so he started calling her Maya for short. Maya's parents had trouble getting along, and when she was 3, they divorced. Her parents thought it would be better for her grandmother to raise them instead, so they sent Maya and her brother on a train to live with their grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. They called their grandma Henderson Mama. Most of the people in Stamps were black, and it was a segregated town. Segregated means that everyone who was black attended a different school, ate at their own restaurants, and lived in their own neighborhood. Maya's grandmother and her uncle Willie owned a store in Stamps, and Maya and her brother Bailey lived in a room in the back of the store. Mama loved her grandchildren and took good care of them. She also wanted them to be responsible, so she taught them good manners and made them help at the store. Often Maya's job was to sweep the floors. Their uncle Willie taught them to read and believed they should have an education. It was at this time that Maya fell in love with words as she read new books. One of her favorite authors was William Shakespeare. Charles Dickens was another favorite. While living in Stamps, Maya's brother Bailey was her best friend. They spent all their time working and playing and learning together. They loved to run in the woods and had lots of freedom. Bailey always stood up for Maya when people teased her or said mean things. Maya loved her older brother very much. In 1935, Maya's father came to Stamps to bring them back to the city where he lived, St. Louis, Missouri. They weren't used to the city, but were glad to see their mother again, who also lived there. St. Louis had a big library, and Maya spent her free time checking out books and reading them there. Before this time, Maya had a safe childhood. But when she was 7, she was hurt by her mother's boyfriend. This horrible experience caused her to stop talking. No one knew what to do. Eventually, Maya and Bailey moved back to Stamps to be with their grandmother and Uncle Willie again. For 5 years, Maya didn't speak. Instead, she spent most of her time reading and writing. In 1941, Maya's grandmother decided they needed to move back in with their mother, who now lived in San Francisco, California, because the schools were better there. She and Bailey were now 13 and 14 and enjoyed the new city with the amazing Golden Gate Bridge and cable cars. Maya liked her new school and did well there. She spent her free time writing poems and her own stories. She also started taking singing and dancing lessons. But Bailey had a harder time in San Francisco, and often he got into trouble and ran away from home. Maya missed Bailey, and this caused her to struggle in school. She decided to take a break and look for a job. In San Francisco, people use cable cars on tracks to move all around the city. Maya applied to be a cable car conductor, the person who takes people's tickets and helps them on the cable car. She ended up becoming the first African-American cable conductor. After a semester of working, she decided to go back to school. She also learned that Bailey joined the Navy, and they wrote letters back and forth. She was happy to hear from her brother again. In 1945, during her last year of high school, Maya had her first baby and named him Clyde Bailey after her brother. She and the father didn't end up getting married, so Maya was left to raise Clyde on her own. For the next several years, she worked as a waitress to earn money to take care of Clyde. She also worked at a music store and later as a calypso dancer at a club called the Purple Onion. There she sang and danced for the audience. Performing before an audience made her very nervous, but she did it anyway and found she had a talent for it and got better and better as she continued to practice and improve her skill. Soon people all over San Francisco were waiting in lines at the Purple Onion to watch Maya perform. Her name started showing up in the newspapers and on the radio. Her next big break was joining a touring group that performed a musical called Porgy and Bess. They traveled all over Europe and Africa, visiting 22 different countries to perform. Maya loved visiting foreign countries, and while traveling, began to learn other languages and write about the places she visited. When the tour was done, she returned home to be with her son and continued working as a dancer. But Maya knew her real love was writing poems and stories. She had many experiences in her life. She wanted to share these. While living in Los Angeles, she met a famous author, John Oliver Killens, who read some of her stories and encouraged her to move to New York so she could share her own stories. In New York, Maya joined the Harlem City Writers Guild, where writers met to share their stories and give each other advice. In New York, Maya listened to a speech given by Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke about how people should be treated the same, no matter the color of their skin. Maya liked Martin Luther King Jr. and helped put on shows to raise money for him and his cause, which was called the Civil Rights Movement. They believed that all people should be treated equal and treated the same. They wanted to end segregation. Maya continued to help with the Civil Rights Movement by writing and helping earn money for the cause. She later moved to Egypt to help with civil rights in Africa. There she wrote for a newspaper and met other famous civil rights leaders like Malcolm X. Later, Maya moved back to New York and continued to write and speak about civil rights. There, a famous Black author and friend, James Baldwin, encouraged Maya to write her life story. This is called an autobiography. When Maya finished her autobiography in 1969, she gave it the title, I Know Why a Caged Bird Sings. She gave it this title because many times in her life she felt like she was living in a cage, not always free to live and act the way she wanted. To Maya, this cage was racism and abuse. But her story was also hopeful, like the bird singing, because she believed that even when someone's life is hard and painful, they can still find joy and happiness. Her book, I Know Why a Caged Bird Sings, was a huge success, and soon many knew about Maya Angelou and her incredible life story. Maya continued to write. She wrote a book of poems and a screenplay for a movie. She starred in a musical on Broadway and a TV miniseries called Roots about the history of slavery in America. She was also married to a French cartoonist and writer. Her son was married and had a child of his own, so she became a grandmother. Maya wrote more books of poems and traveled and spoke and told her life story to inspire others and give them hope. She read her poems for 3 of the presidents, and in 2010 was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor a civilian can receive. In 2014, Maya died peacefully in her home in North Carolina. She was 86 years old, and after her passing, people all around the world spoke about how much they loved her and loved the words she wrote. Her life and actions and deeds were an inspiration to so many people over the years. Maya once wrote, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. She also wrote, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Something else she wrote, if you're always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be. If you want to learn more about Maya Angelou, check out our website, bedtimehistorystories.com. There we've included links to a video of her reading a poem at President Clinton's inaugural address, along with links to some of our favorite Maya Angelou poems and books and movies. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, our second hymn is number 147 in the Great Hymnal, When People's on This Earth. When All the People's on This Earth, sorry. Thank you. Good job. I like that song. Our first reading today, or actually our only reading today, I really originally thought I was going to have two, and I didn't change it in my script here. My apologies. So our reading today is from a website called storynet.com, and it's written by Manadeepa Mrinal. I'm sure I'm not saying that name correctly. Mrinal Roy. And she starts with my favorite Maya Angelou quote: "You do the best you can until you know better, and when you know better, you do better." She says, and she goes on to say, this is one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou because it is so true and it goes for everything in your life. This phrase has a simple and clear meaning to it. I feel that it means that we often make mistakes because we don't know the right way to do stuff. Once we learn the right way, we understand and learn from our mistakes and change it and don't repeat it again. Learning from our mistakes is important. Basically, they say it's no use to hold grudges towards your past or hold yourself hostage to who you were and what you did before when you didn't know better. At some point in time and with many more experiences, you might come to realize a certain truth about yourself or about life. At this juncture in time, we now know better, so you must seek to do better. So you must seek to do better. Know thyself, and to thine own self be true, is Greek wisdom. If you know better and you now seek to do better, you remain true to yourself, because in the end you are dancing on this earth for a short period of time. Have you ever wondered what will happen if you admit that you're not perfect, and that's okay? Most of the times we screw up, and that's okay, as we're humans, and it is bound to happen. And guess what? When you know better, you will do better. So today, my friends, don't be so hard on yourself. It's okay. You will screw up. You'll fall on your face. Hell, I do it all the time. Me too. And then we tell the world about it. When we know better, you do better. Since we learn, we overcome, and we improve, and we grow. So, okay, thank you. So the message today. Oh, I missed that in my script, so I apologize. So our RE, let's get our kids out, go do some RE stuff, have some fun. Yay! Exactly. I got to remember to put that in the script here. We're good. All right. So, this is, and it's my favorite quote too, right? When you know better, you do better kind of thing. And this is something that I utilize when I go out and I do my diversity training. I try to walk in not with a finger pointing perspective, because if an organization's bringing me in, it's because they recognize there are some concerns in their group and they want to do better, right? But I think I need people to also know, right, that we're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. And what I say to them regularly as I sit in front of them is like, we're all going to step in a steaming pile of dog poop. And I don't usually use the word poop. But we're going to step in it. We're going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes because we're human beings. And now the thing is, with mistakes, sometimes our harms are intentional and sometimes they're unintentional, right? And we need to know the difference. And there's a foundation for this in employment law, if you will. Because in that foundation of employment law, we can discriminate intentionally. We can choose to treat somebody differently because of race, sex, religion, color, you name it, right? We can intentionally do that, which we know blatantly is wrong. But we can also do it unintentionally, like having what we think is a good policy, but not recognizing there's an unconscious bias in that policy that then creates harm for others, and not recognizing that. So, right, how do we fix that? Well, it's not easy. It requires us all to do some really, really hard work, but we can do that. So, a little bit about Maya's history, and the quote just sort of overlaps with the message today, and this message has been something I've been planning for a while. She really demonstrates how important it is to do the right thing, that even in her traumatic and difficult upbringing as a Black woman under Jim Crow and various other experiences, walking in melanated skin, as a friend of mine will say, is a really difficult thing to do, particularly certainly was in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And the interesting thing, the story talks about her being part of the Harlem Writers Guild, and my mother-in-law was a part of that. And for many of you, my mother-in-law was Black. And I may or may not have shared the story, and if I have, you can stop me and I'll move on. But my mother-in-law in the 50s was married to a white man, which, in Virginia was still illegal. But she was living in New York, and so it felt moderately safe to do that. But when she said one time, and I don't remember why we were having this conversation, but she said to me, I was telling Lou, who was her husband, who was a white man, that if we didn't eat on way to Washington, D.C., if we did not eat in Philadelphia, we would not be able to eat until we got to Washington, D.C. And you're nodding, you get it. 30 years ago when we had this conversation, I was like, honey, I know there's not Interstate 95, but there's plenty of restaurants between Philadelphia and D.C. And this delightfully beautiful woman who's really helped me so much in my life, I adore her and miss her, patted me on the head metaphorically and said, oh, honey child, did you forget about Jim Crow? I went, yes, I did. Why? Because it wasn't my experience. It wasn't my life. It wasn't in the realm of anything that I would understand. And I went, and that was that first watershed moment for me to recognize my little world as a white suburban girl in, Connecticut was not the world that everybody else experienced. That I thought, right, that I was being virtuous when I said, our blood's all the same color. We are all the same. We're just human beings. I don't see race or color. Wrong. We do. Our brain, the perceptual process that our brain goes through as we encounter different things, different people, you name it, it sees color. You may not choose to act on it consciously, but it doesn't mean unconsciously we're not doing that. So there are unconscious biases that really push us, and we don't even understand why. This is the unintended harm. Like, we don't even know that we're doing it. We don't know that we're creating harm. And so when I talk with a lot of people, I hear people get very defensive right away when someone says, hey, that thing you said, that really hurt me. And you're like, oh, wow. But then you get defensive and you go, well, I didn't mean it. I would never do that. And it's like, you're right. Consciously, you wouldn't. But there was still an unintended effect. You still created a harm, however we define a harm, right? And so given that, right, we recognize that we've got to say that harm doesn't have to always be intentional. Harm can be unintentional. So, people wonder, does bias, unconscious bias, actually exist? And there are a lot of people that are, no, that doesn't happen. Well, let me take you through a process. What's the average height for men? Just throw a number, it's all good. It's actually 5'9" to 5'10", so roughly speaking, And what about the average height for women? That's more like what you were saying. 5'5", 5'6", right, exactly. So now we all would agree here, men and women equally can be CEOs, can do work. I think we would all agree with that, right? Consciously, we all agree with this. Do you know that the majority of presidents of the United States and CEOs are over 6 foot tall? Why? Tall people are perceived to be more powerful. That's an unconscious bias. Now, that's not to say that it didn't matter in the days when we were being chased by saber-toothed tigers, right? The tall leader was the one that was going to keep the tribe or the group safe. And that's good. That's embedded in our DNA, and even unconsciously, a message that we get regularly. When a tall person walks into a room, we go, wow, they must be a really important leader. But we know the correlation, and I'm going to get my science geek on, the correlation between leadership skills and height is a big fat zero. Zero. There's no correlation to it whatsoever because but we still have that unconscious bias. It's there. I've done some unconscious bias problems myself. I'm going to own it. And if I don't make myself vulnerable here, it's going to be, a bad thing. So I had a party at my house. Friend brought her friend over, and they were having this conversation about working in a vet clinic. Now, let me give you some background about me, if you haven't already known. I'm the first person in my immediate family to go to college. My dad went for a couple classes and then he dropped it. But I was the first person who went to college, first person who got a bachelor's degree, master's degree, and ultimately get my PhD, right? So education was always something my parents pressed on me. Get educated, you'll do better, you'll get ahead, all the things. So you get this unconscious message that more education is better. More education is the best thing that you can do. And for whatever reason, that was this message in my head. And then this person, as she was talking about working in a vet clinic, I said, "Oh, are you a vet or just a vet tech?" Now, you all need a friend like my friend Kathy, who went like this. Did you just hear what you just said? And I'm like, oh, wow. So my unconscious bias, I didn't realize it at that moment, that's my unconscious bias. That I put so much unconscious value on education because that's the message that I got. Do I consciously believe that? No, not at all. But unconsciously, that's what my brain said. So the words came out of my mouth before I even realized it. And I went, wow, I got to be mindful of this now. You know better, you do better. So I've worked really hard to overcome that. Another experience, which was not something that was necessarily in my own control, but I want to be able to tell this story as well because this leads us, further into this discussion. When we were growing up, we used to go camping. Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day weekend. Big thing to do. It started out with a small group of friends, and it blew up. And by the time the last couple of years that my father hosted these things, there were like 20, 30 families that would come. Many of them people that he worked with, et cetera, people that my high school, one of my grammar school teachers came along with us. And he wasn't my teacher anymore, but we were close with him, and he came camping too. So it was this big, huge to-do. And of course, there's a mixed groups of people. And one of my father's friends, as I realize now, I realized as an adult, but didn't see it as a child, of course, was really racist. And one time we were sitting at the camping trip, and most of the kids were younger than me, so I'm like, I'm going to sit at the picnic table and just read a book, because that's what I wanted to do. And this guy turned around and said to my dad, now they were just having this conversation, and my ears are like, ooh, let me hear this. And he says, no daughter of mine is ever going to marry a insert N-word. And the N-word was never used at my house. And I heard that, and I went, what's my dad going to say? And this is what he did. He said, yeah, I know what you mean. And he moved on. Now, in retrospect, when I had this conversation with him years in the future, he said, I just didn't want to rock the boat in a public space and have this debate. Now, this is the mid-'70s, right? We're still really super sensitive about these issues and not willing to have those difficult conversations. But my 12-year-old brain heard, you don't get to marry a black guy. You're not allowed to date black men. They're not supposed to be in your life because your dad said, I know what you mean. So fast forward, this is like a moment, and I'm 12. Fast forward, I'm 27 years old, 26 years old maybe. And I've been good friends with my ex-husband for a long time. Then we decided to start dating. And I said to my mom, I said, hey, how am I going to tell Dad that I'm dating a black guy? And she's like, what are you talking about? Why do you think your dad would care? I said, I'm like, I don't know. And I had to sit back. And it took me like a week of pondering, and sometimes it's just, like unconscious, like memories start to flow. And then I remembered that message, which worked at me at this unconscious level that I wasn't even aware of. And I told my mom, and she goes, oh my God, I understand why you would think that. She goes, your dad's not going to care. So, of course, I got on the phone and talked with him, and he was like, I'm so glad you're marrying him, whatever, because he loved my ex-husband. But it was just this assumption that I made because I had gotten this message. And so even his message was not intended. It was an unintended message. And he didn't clearly communicate what he really meant, which was, I don't want to deal with this. Could he have handled it better? Absolutely. Could he have said, dude, I hear you. I disagree, but you do you. And that could have let it go without a debate. He could have asserted his position. If you know my dad had a childhood of abuse, and his grandfather had killed his grandmother in domestic violence. My dad did not like conflict. He did not want to confront anybody. He wanted to keep the peace. He wanted to keep the temperature down. And again, pros and cons, right? I applaud him for that, and then I recognize it's a problem, right? So obviously, I understand as an adult, I understand my father so much more, but that underlying harm was definitely an issue. And of course, even hearing messages oftentimes, in the early days from my family about what it meant to be gay, and that was a bad thing. That was an underlying message to me to stay deep in the closet, because I wasn't even willing to admit it to myself until I was about 40. So anyway, a lot of stuff, right? So let's talk about the sources of the bias. It can come from our experiences or conversations like I had with my father. Or actually, I didn't even have a conversation with him. I overheard a conversation that my father was having. So I didn't hear the whole context. I just sort of heard the things. Bias can come from our own personal traumas. My father's own trauma, how it informed the way that he talked with this guy and tried to make peace about something that maybe he shouldn't have tried to make a lot of peace over or try to wash over. There are traumatic experiences out there. Maya Angelou talks about her own traumatic experience and refusing to talk for 5, 6, 7, whatever it was, years that she said in the video because of that inner trauma. And so our own traumas and our own experiences will influence, right, the way that we think about these things. Any casual interaction that you have with somebody is going to have an impact on you. Messages from friends and families and institutions. Hear it in the media. The terminologies that people use. This person's a thug, this person's a victim, right? It's like when they use inflamed words, that creates unconsciously the bias that we experience underneath, right? So here's another one. There was a big to-do, I think it was a school in Houston, maybe. It was definitely in the South. And they had this sign that was in the women's locker room. And the women's locker room sign said, the more you act like a lady, the more he'll act like a gentleman. Right. What was their intention? Was their intention to say girls are responsible for boys' behaviors? It's not really what the intention was, but that's the point. Even a subtle message, when we don't think about the consequences of that, can create that kind of problem. And so that was the huge debate in the school. And I even tried to have a conversation with a group that I was brought in to do some diversity training with, and I tried to explain this, and I showed them the example of the thing, and they're like, well, that's not what they meant. Well, yeah, you're probably right. It's not what they meant. But grammatically speaking, if you're a young person and you hear this, that's what you're going to think. That's what you're going to say. So on a daily basis, our unconscious assumptions, certainly can have an impact on how we think, how we behave, whether intentionally or unintentionally it happens. So we have to make sense of those biases and figure out how we can overcome them. And the first thing I would recommend, if you are interested in doing, is going to Project Implicit at the Harvard website, at Harvard University website. It's implicit.harvard.edu. So if you just Google Project Implicit, it'll come up. You go in, and they have a laundry list of different tests on race, sex, color, gun ownership, religion, women in sciences versus in the humanities kind of things. All of these things, gay, straight, you name it, right? And the thing is, what it's trying to test and what they're doing is your response time in responding to the questions. The longer you take, in fact, the more careful you are, the more it actually flags that you may have an unconscious bias because you are being so careful, intentionally, that it might be covering up an unconscious bias. There's been a ton of research on this and supporting this. And then one of the most interesting stories that as I was reading a book by Malcolm Gladwell, was talking about, it's called Blink, if you have not heard of the book, and he talks about how he utilized these graduate assistants, that not Gladwell, but the researcher who did the implicit association stuff. This researcher had his graduate assistants every single day take the test and then track the diary of what they did every day and sort of monitor changes in perceptions. And this one individual specifically had done a longitudinal every day, slightly biased against Black. So it's like really biased, slightly biased, neutral, and then biased towards, and really, whatever. So it's the whole continuum. And every day it was like slightly biased against Black people. And he said, look, I would never consciously do that, but clearly there's something underlying, and why is that? And a whole host of reasons. But here's what happened, which was really wild. Like one morning he woke up and it went, boop, went in the opposite direction. What happened? What did he do? He was watching the Summer Olympics. And he was watching Carl Lewis, Jackie Joyner-Kersee, one of our local ladies, Florence Clifford Joyner, these amazing Black athletes winning medal after medal and being successful. And so no longer was this unconscious message, Black is bad, but Black became good, Black became positive. Even something as subtle as that, of watching a TV show and seeing success, can change our unconscious messages and our unconscious biases. So, how do we manage that? Well, we have to first of all be aware of when we are in an uncomfortable situation. Let me use my father as an example. In my father's situation, he could have and should have said something, right? But he didn't. We should question every single time we have these assumptions, question the assumptions, if we can. I mean, that's what we do as UUs, right? We question everything, so we should be questioning that as well. Other ways we can manage this. You need to read. You need to read stuff about the areas in which you have your greatest concerns, or you feel like there are some unconscious underlying biases available. And again, take the tests, take a whole bunch of them. No one's going to know but you, right? But it's good for us to know where our trigger points are. And then take the time to learn more. We've got a librarian here, right? We've got a couple of librarians here, right? They'll tell you some good books to read. One of my favorite books to read about racism and white nationalism was Rising Out of Hatred. And it talked about how this young man who grew up in this white nationalist culture was lifted up. And he had people that knew his position, that talked to him, worked with him for 4 years while he was in school. He was at the New School, actually, in Florida before it became a Republican stronghold. And he talked with this individual, and eventually he went, well, hell, you're right. This is wrong. They pulled apart his beliefs, but it was not something you can do fast. It's something you have to do incrementally. So that's a great book. There's tons of books out there. I mean, Claudia has been sharing banned books. right? And there's a reason why they're banned, because people want to reinforce a certain belief and not allow themselves to hear different stories. And so, find those banned books. Our librarians will tell you what they are, and learn more about those things. Listen to podcasts. Even if it's weird and you're like, I don't think I'll know that. Take the time to learn what it's like. That's why I've taken the time to listen to documentaries on Christian nationalism and stuff like that. Does it offend me? Yeah, it kind of does. And it makes me uncomfortable. And that's where the learning opportunity is for me. Not because I want to be that way, but I want to understand why they are that way, which made a big difference for me in the way that I think about how I want to interact with others. Have a trusted friend like my friend Kathy, who said, "Just a vet tech? What the heck are you talking about?" I'm like, oopsies. And be willing to recognize and own when you stepped in that big steaming pile of dog poop. I mean, you got to own it. That's the hardest thing, I think, for people. When I work with people, I say that the hardest thing is just owning when you've made a mistake and sitting with it. And I've done that. And I won't get into this last story because it was a really hard one for me to learn. But I talked to a trusted friend who, as I was trying to understand more, I created even more harm, which was even worse. But then I took a step back and went, I did it. I got to own it. I got to fix it. And I worked through it. Now, it's our initial reaction, like we want to be defensive, and then we want to, throw ourselves down and rend our clothes and go, oh, forgive me. That still centers you and not the person you harmed. And so we say, I'm sorry. We say, I need to fix the problem, and I'm going to move forward. And then you sit with your discomfort for as long as you can. Because guess what? That discomfort eventually fades. You make peace with it. We be gentle with ourselves, and we let things pass. That doesn't mean that we ignore what we did and we don't fix it. No, that has to be the most important thing we do. But that pain that we're feeling in the moment that makes us resist, like embracing the problem that we created, that's not going to help us. Right? We don't want to resist that. We want to embrace that discomfort and then sit with it. So how does this tie into our UU stuff? Well, I already talked about those three principles: the interdependence, the pluralism, and the justice. And all of that, that's what we're called to do, right? Those are in our core values, about protecting those who are oppressed, about owning when we create harm, no matter what it is. And it has to start with owning and recognizing our unconscious biases, because they're there. We all have them. I'll be the first to admit it, as I've shared with you already. When we own that, then it gives us the opportunity to learn and grow. When we question our assumptions, we learn and understand more deeply, we think more critically, and we move forward more collaboratively. And we live those values of interdependence and pluralism and justice, and making sure that that's the thing that drives us. And we're going to make mistakes, people. We absolutely are going to make mistakes when it comes to all sorts of issues. We will. But it's what you do when someone says to you, well, now you should know better. And now, when we know better, we need to do better. And that's the goal. Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. Whew. All right, our final hymn, number 300, With a Heart and Mind. you. As Jesse passes around the offering basket, I offer the gentle reminder this is a community of faith supported only by your giving. However, stewardship is more than just financials. It is also about donating time and talent to help our church. If you can't write a check, please help our church survive and thrive by offering your time to make coffee, bring snacks, serve as an usher, we'll help in the pulpit, serve on other committees. Peg's got a job for you. Please donate as you can with your time, talent, and or treasure. All is needed for our church to prosper. Obviously, our P.O. box is up there, and you can give through Givelify or PayPal on our website. Give what you will and what you are able, for you are a generous people. Thank you, honey. Appreciate it. So please join me with our offering prayer. May this offering equip us to inspire love and seek justice. So we can move forward. A couple of announcements there. Ian, you'll be in the pulpit next week. Yay, thank you. Following that, Reverend V, and then Claudia will be the last 2 months. Our in-gathering and water communion will be on September 29th. So for those of you who are not familiar with water communion, what it is, we take a source of water that has some meaning to us. For some people, it's where they like to vacation, but for others, it could just be water from their tap because their home feels warm and welcoming. And so whatever it is, we don't ask, we don't care. Bring your water. We add it to our bowl here, and then we save that water and we freeze it, and then we try to share. When we moved here, we didn't take our little water cubes with us, but now that we're here and more stable, we've got a freezer that we can put our little water cubes into, but we have to make sure we've got it in a bag that says don't use these. So there's that. Anna Dees will be meeting at My Just Desserts in Alton. Let Sandy Shaner know if you're going to make it this week, 11:30 on Thursday. Anybody needs a ride, let us know. But My Just Desserts, as you know, is a stronghold in Alton, and then it closed down for a while because the owner died, and they just couldn't keep it up. But it's been bought out and resurfaced, and we're very happy. The men's lunch group, where are y'all going? Don't know yet. We'll just figure it out on the 11th, or maybe in the morning of the 12th. So it's good. On the 14th, it's a busy month, folks, if you haven't already noticed. We're going to take a deep breath as we move into September here. The 14th, Goshen Market from 8 to noon. If you can help Peg out, please do, because we have a conflicting event. We've got Pride in Alton on that day. Jesse is taking lead on that. We've got gifts. I just have to get the spinning wheel, because you're going to use your spinning wheel at the market, but we'll get one for the Pride. Claudia is going to be leading a Zoom class on social justice for the rest of us, 6:30 to 8 on the 17th and the 24th. The Masons have a breakfast on the 21st. And also we have our outdoor adventure at Bergfried. Please RSVP with Sayer. You probably saw that in the newsletter. So we can RSVP with him, or you can RSVP with me. And the goal here, right, is just to share experience, being up there, enjoying time in nature as a group. So enjoy and have some fun. 9/22 and 9/29, we got the parade. Peg, you got something to share on that one? Okay, so we're going to practice our lawn chair brigade in the parking lot right out here, so that'll be fine. Good. And then Unity Fest is 11 to 4, and then in the evening of the 28th is our Summer Osborne concert. I'm working today on getting the advertisement stuff out there. I may call you to help me with some graphic things. Again, nothing fancy, I promise, but just something simple and easy. Just make sure your eye looks at it and goes, yeah, that's okay. That doesn't offend me, because I trust you. Yeah, I don't want to offend anybody. It's not my goal. But it's going to be at the Dome from basically from 7 to 9:30. The doors will open at 7. The concert will start at 7:30. Tickets will be $20. Sayer and I are working on getting baskets and donations and anything anybody's willing to. As we come up with our list of things, he and I are going to talk this week. We're going to ask, if you can't come to the concert, I get it, right? But there are plenty of people that want to come see Summer Osborne. I'm not as worried about that, but we may need donations for like snacks and stuff. We want to put together little skewers of things, and it'll be kind of fun. All right, I think that's it. Anything else? Alex, anything you want to add? Okay, good. Peg, anything else? You're not going to use the spinning thing at Goshen Market. Okay, so who's got the spinning thing now? Jennifer has it. Okay, so we'll get that from Jennifer. That'll work. That'll be good. Anything else? Anybody want to add? Anything important to share? Mary, please. Mm. Good. Mary Johnson said if you're not already on the mailing list, to fill out one of the white cards at the greeting desk, and we'll get you on the mailing list. So you'll get a weekly This Week in the News, and then once a month you'll get our newsletter that tells you, big picture, everything that's kind of going on. So, all right. So join me in reciting a prayer as I extinguish the chalice. The light of truth and meaning cannot be put out. We are keepers of this flame until we meet again. Our closing words are from Orlando Brugnoli. As we move through life, finding ourselves always newly wise and newly foolish, we ask that our mistakes be small and not hurtful. We ask that as we gain experience, we do not forget our innocence, for they are both part of the whole. Thank you, and have a blessed week, and keep the world in your minds and hearts. Amen. Host Luke and Joe. Thank you. And Peg, we need to clean up today, right? Yeah, all this has to be restored. So go have some snacks, and then if anybody wants to come back in here and move things around, that'd be great.